Welcome to today's session on Introduction to School Counseling. Now, I'm sure most of you have some sort of an idea of what comprises school counseling. Hence, this session is going to be a short and simple one, just to give you some idea of what are the basic factors that comprise school counseling. Let's dive right into it. Alright, so what basically is school counseling? Now, I thought it would be best to look at it by answering a few questions. So, the first question that I have here is, who does school counseling? Now, most of us would generally say that a person who has completed education in school counseling, has completed their course in school counseling, definitely masters in school counseling. So a school psychologist is someone who's eligible to become a school counselor. Yes, but considering that in India you don't really have many colleges that offer a course in school counseling as such. So yes, you can look at people who have completed masters in psychology. They could have specialized in clinical psychology as well, but since the need of the hour is to have a school counselor, you have people from the larger umbrella of psychology who start working as a school counselor. The next question: when do we conduct school counseling? Now, most often than not, you'd notice that counseling is done in a school setup only when a student's behavior or academic progress is brought to the notice of either the teacher or the parent. Hence, generally, the norm is that either a teacher or a parent feels that a child needs or has some sort of a difficulty that they're facing, which cannot be catered to by either the teacher or the parent, is when they refer the child for school counseling. Next, now this third question is, I think, the most simplest of all, that is where school counseling gets done. So yes, school counseling gets done in a school environment, hence the term school counseling, right? And I think that's the most simplest question that we have here. The last question that we have here is, why do we do school counseling? Now, there are various number of reasons why school counseling is done, right? And why counseling is employed in a school environment. But mostly you will find that school counseling is done when progress is not really noticeable. So either you have students who are lagging behind, you have students who are not able to cope with what is being taught in the class environment. Yes, so that's what we're looking at in terms of progress. The second and third point that I've mentioned is somewhat interrelated, if that's how we can put it. So we're saying disruption, and disruption obviously comes in terms of behavioral disruption that we're looking at. So either the child has acting out tendencies, the child causes disruption in the classroom, the child gets into fights with other students, and so on and so forth. Yeah, so we do have many other reasons why school counseling or why counseling per se is done in a school setup, and that is what we will be focusing on in the further slides that we have. All right, so the basic questions that we have here are, who does school counseling, when counseling is done in a school setup, where school counseling is done, and why do we do it? Yes. Now, school counseling does come as one of the areas. So, like we're saying, that counseling done in a school setup is the most easiest way to put what is school counseling about. But the term arises from the fact that the counseling needs or counseling application is done in a school place or in a school environment, hence the term school counseling. And although we'd like to believe that school counseling follows the basic ethical guidelines that we have in the larger umbrella of counseling, it does differ from other areas of counseling, and that's what we're looking at here. So the first thing that we're looking at is how does it differ? The number of individuals involved or the different types of individuals involved. Now, generally, when you have a counseling session, it's a counseling session is either done because the parent notices a problem, generally, if it's a student, yes, or the person comes to you on their own for counseling. And that's when we're looking at adults 18 and above. But when we're looking at school counseling, in a school counseling or a school setup, there are many more people involved in the counseling process, right? Which is what we will be looking at in the second point. But getting back to the first point, who are the individuals involved? So yes, you have the parent. Yes, we have the teacher as well, because for most part of the day, the student spends with the teacher in the school. And then you do definitely have the principal or the headmaster of that school. So by and large, you'd notice that these three positions or these three people tend to be involved in the school counseling process so as to ensure that everyone has an idea or an understanding of what can be done to help facilitate improvement for that student. The second point, coming to the process of how school counseling gets done. Now, like I mentioned previously, school counseling is generally done when either a parent or a teacher brings it to the notice of the counselor in the school. Yes. Apart from that, in that process, what happens is that you'd look at the school counselor screening the child for any kind of, whether it's a learning disability or whether it's any counseling need that the child might have. Yes. So once the screening is done and the counselor has enough information on the child, the counselor is then in a better position to decide what would be the next step that needs to be taken, right? Now, if you look at both of these points, we are definitely discussing about something that the fourth point also impinges upon, and that is how different are the ethics that we are looking at here. Yes. So yes, we're saying that we do maintain confidentiality, but if we are considering that the child's life is at risk at any point in time, and yes, when you consider counseling in a school setup, we always put the child's protection first. Hence the reason why we need to follow child protection policies. So yes, we will follow confidentiality, and the confidentiality is obviously between the counselor and the student. So unless and until the student is willing to let the parents or the teacher know about something that has been discussed in the session, we don't really go ahead and discuss it with them. But yes, we do ensure that the parents and the teachers and the headmaster have some idea about what we are doing in the session, and also about how we are moving towards using the techniques that we would to help facilitate improvement. Okay. Now coming to the third point that I have not touched upon, that's the areas of focus. Now, like I said, the areas of focus is what I will be talking about more in the further slides, but just to touch upon it right now. And that's the main reason why we're saying that this is quite different from other areas of counseling, is that generally when we look at counseling, it's a one-on-one process. And since it's a one-on-one process, you notice that areas of focus generally are leaning towards the individual's success in the specific field that they are having a difficulty with. So it could be relationships, it could be personal areas or personal goals that they might have. It could be something related to self-actualization. It could be something related to, let's say, family concerns that they might have. But nonetheless, you'd notice that generally when we're considering counseling, we're looking at sort of a specific area. Whereas when you're considering school counseling, there are many areas that come into the picture of school counseling. Yes, and we will be discussing these in the next slides that come. All right, moving on to understanding what are the basic objectives and goals. And the reason why I've mentioned them as objectives and goals is because it's the reason why we are looking at the areas of focus as well. So if you look at what we have here, it says we're looking at career, we're looking at academic, we're looking at personal, and we're looking at sociocultural. And all of them have been equally divided, and there is an equal amount of importance that's given to attaining these goals and objectives that a school counselor tends to have. Let's look at the first goal that we're looking at. Yes. All right, so we have academic goals here. Now, sorry, I'm so sorry. Okay. Okay. All right, coming back to academic goals. Now, when we say academic goals, yes, we're focusing on education, more or say, but we're also focusing on how to ensure that the child is making optimum utilization of the resources that are available in the school environment, and ensuring that the child is also making optimum utilization of his own skills and reaching the best capacity that's possible for that child. So if you look at some of the pointers that I have mentioned here, and these are not all of them, there are many more that we could consider, but just to give you an idea of what we're looking at in terms of academic goals, the first thing we have here is success in school. Yes, so definitely when we're saying academic or education related goals, we definitely want to ensure that the child is at least performing in an average manner in comparison to his peers, or maybe even better than them, but at least on an average par performance that he must be exhibiting. Yes, the second one that I have here is the effective study skills. Right, now effective study skills are something that definitely can be developed, and depending on how we generally tend to learn or take in information, maybe whether we're saying we retain it better in a certain manner or in a certain method, and those could be focused on to ensure that the student or the child is implementing effective study skills. The third point here that is listed and we're looking at is the adjustment to the school environment. Now, most often than not, you'd notice there are a lot of children who tend to change schools, who tend to leave behind their old peer group and move into a new environment, or the background or the cultural background of the school is different from what they're generally used to, and that tends to become a little difficult for children to cope with. So ensuring that they're able to adapt to the environment that they're getting into also becomes very essential to understanding or helping them attain their academic goals. Speed of learning is another one, and method or style of learning is another point that we definitely consider as an academic goal. So, like we say, that most of us have a different method or a style of learning. Let's say, for example, some of us prefer pictures, so we are more visual people. Some of us maybe, let's say, easier with texts, so we're better at language. And based on the kind of sensory perception we tend to use, we are either better at one or the other, and that sort of helps us retain information better. Yes, so understanding this style of learning or method of learning helps us know, or also helps us convey to the teacher what might work and what might not work. Yes, so in that process, what we are doing then is that we are ensuring that the teacher has an idea of what style of learning works for the students, and they are able to implement that in the process of providing information to the students in the classroom setting, and that works like a win-win situation for both the student and the teacher. The last point that I have here under academic goals, and like I said, these do not encompass all of what comes under academic goals, is the student-teacher relationship. Now this becomes a very crucial or important factor that we need to consider, because depending on how a student really perceives their teacher makes a lot of difference towards their relationship, towards how they respond, towards how they react in the classroom, towards their attention, and eventually towards the amount of progress that they would make in their academic goal. All right, the next goal that we're looking at is the personal goals. Now, under personal goals, we are looking at both. So, self-development is one, and family related concerns as the other one. When we say family related concerns, what we're trying to say then is that any kind of a concern that might be a difficulty for the child in terms of maybe relationship with parents, relationship with siblings, the family dynamics that they might have, and all of those factors, though very environmental, but it's very important to understand these dynamics, because that's where they're spending half of their day. So yes, you have half of the day that goes in school, but the rest of the time goes with the family, right? And to ensure that they are capable of, let's say, facilitating or providing an environment that is safe enough for the child to feel like they are improving, safe enough for the child to express their opinions and views, and that becomes very important, because we definitely need to ensure as school counselors that the family related concerns are not the reason why the child is, let's say, lagging behind in the classroom, or the child is, let's say, sleeping in the classroom because the child doesn't get to sleep at home. Yes, those are just a few examples to help you understand why we definitely need to consider family related concerns. Now, the second one that I've listed here is the self development. So our main purpose or goal as school counselors is to ensure that every student is able to, let's say, reach self actualization. So we want them to be or become their best possible selves. Yes, and that is only possible when we start inculcating in them a sense of, or a need for self-development, and that is only possible through introspection. Yes. So for that, or to work towards that goal, yes, we look at some of the personal goals as being understanding our own cognitions, our attitudes towards various factors that we have in our life, understanding one's own strengths and weaknesses, helping them or developing the communication skills that are necessary to go on in life. And most important of all of them is developing optimism, because that's something that stays with you right till the end, and that becomes a way of life for us as individuals. All right. So, as of now, we've looked at the academic goals and the personal goals. Now, moving on to the third quarter that we had, and that's the socio-cultural goals. Now, as important as academic and personal goals might be, socio-cultural goals become very important and very essential to be considered. And these are quite self-explanatory as well. So if you look at the 4 pointers, we are looking at the school environment, we're looking at the family environment, we're looking at the cultural background, and we're looking at their friend circle. Now, the school environment and the family environment we sort of discussed in the previous slides, but just to run you through, we are looking at their interaction with their peers. We are looking at the interaction with other teachers, not necessarily only their own class teacher. We're looking at how does the school's environment in terms of facilities, in terms of resources, inculcate in them a sense of learning. Yes. And like I said, with family environment, we definitely need to understand what are the family dynamics and how safe does the child feel to be able to express their own opinions. Now, coming to cultural background, when we say cultural background, we are definitely looking at the kind of society and the kind of exposure that we have. And like we say that within cultural, we also consider the socio-economic background that every person comes from. And that tends to play an important role, because most often than not, you would see that financial resources play a very strong role in deciding what kind of education you're able to get, the kind of peers that you tend to have, the kind of friends that you make. Yes. So the cultural background becomes very important to understand, because based on the culture that they belong to, the kind of exposure that they had, we are better capable of understanding what they have been through, and in a better position to understand what is all right for them to do and what is not all right, and to understand why they might generally tend to exhibit the behaviors that they do. Now, coming to the last point under sociocultural goals is the friend circle. Now, all of us definitely understand how significant our friend circle, or the role that our friend circle tends to play when we are in a school environment or in a college environment. Yes. And I think you all will be better able to capable of understanding it based on your own experiences, how friends have actually honed our skills, how friends have actually facilitated or motivated us, inspired us. Yes. And friends have the capacity to do that because we trust them, we have a bond with them, and hence it becomes very important to understand the kind of friend circle that a child has, because whether we like it or not, our friend circle tends to influence us in many ways. And we definitely want to ensure that a child is surrounded by friends who are like-minded, who reinforce each other, who motivate each other, rather than bring down or make someone feel inferior, right? Because we're looking at a school environment where obviously we do understand there's going to be a lot of teasing, there's going to be a lot of bullying, there's going to be a lot of ragging. So we want to avoid anything that might be a negative impact for the child. The last objective in terms of goals, and this is something that is not very evident but still is very pertinent when you consider school counseling, and that is considering career prospects and the future prospects that a child has, right? Now, yes, definitely when we're saying that it's in a school, obviously when you're looking at primary school children, you don't really consider, so we don't really focus so much on career guidance as such. But eventually, when you do look at, let's say, high school, and you're looking at 8th, ninth, 10th, or let's say if you're looking at 11th and 12th grades, you do realize the importance of career prospects. Yes, so depending on which area of school we're looking at, whether it's primary school, whether it's kindergarten, whether it's high school, we have different focus areas, or we have different goals that we definitely need to achieve, or objectives that we need to set for ourselves as school counselors. And when we say career or future prospects, we are definitely looking at helping them become independent individuals, and that's the reason why I've put down the third point that we have here, that's self-sufficiency. Yes, so we want the children to grow up to become self-sufficient people, independent individuals who are capable of making decisions, who are capable of solving problems. Yes, and they don't really feel the need to be dependent on someone else to get these things done for them in their lives. So when we say that we want to look at future prospects, and when we say that we are looking at career guidance, we definitely want to consider what are their skills, what are their strengths, how do they play to their strengths, how can they develop their weakness into strengths. Yes, and that is possible as well. So for career and future prospects, we want to guide them. So when we say, that's the reason why I've listed it as guidance and not really as career counseling, because yes, we provide them with an array of options that are likely to lead to success, but in the end the child is making their own decision. Yes, like I said, we want them to become independent individuals who are capable of making their own decisions. Yes, so that covers the four areas, or four basic objective areas that we tend to have as school counselors. To sum it up, and that's the reason why I'm ending these slides with what is school counseling. And to sum this up, what we're saying then is that school counseling is counseling that is a face-to-face session, yes, between two individuals, the counselor and the student, done in a school or a college setting, where the primary objective is to remove any kind of academic barriers that might exist, while also supporting their social and emotional development, and also providing them with the college or career guidance that might be needed, with the help of various tools and techniques. Yeah, so I hope you all have been able to get a clearer picture of what are the various areas that we are going to be focusing on in school counseling. And I haven't really touched upon learning disabilities as such, because we will be looking at that in the remedial education session that we have. But yes, school counselors also need to have an understanding of what are the basic types of learning disabilities, and what are the various kinds of learning difficulties that children might have, and also have some idea of how to go about it, what needs to be done, because most often than not, in a practical setup, you will notice that a school counselor is always interacting with a remedial educator who is actually implementing the techniques that need to be implemented to help the child progress towards their educational goals. Yeah, so that's about it for today's session. I'm hoping you'll have a clearer idea of what school counseling is. And thank you for being attentive. And I shall see you all in the following session that we have. Thank you. One last thing that I forgot. If you all do have any queries, please either comment or post it, and I will definitely get back to you all on any of the queries that you might have. Although I would say that this session has been pretty simple, but nonetheless, if there are any queries that you think I could help you with, definitely send them across to me.